Bart Gets Hit by a Car is a pretty intense episode. And there were moments in this where I genuinely didn't know where it was going, particularly the very last scene, which I won't go into any detail about. I'm not going to spoil anything in this episode, but it is pretty intense. This is episode 10 of the second season, and this was directed by Mark Kirkland, aired originally in January 1991. And in this episode, Mr. Burns and Smithers hit Bart while he's out playing on his skateboard. And we meet Lionel Hutz, who has convinced primarily Homer, not so much Marge, that they need to pursue a lawsuit against Mr. Burns to get as much money as they can for the problems that they have caused for Bart. Now, Bart, yeah, he's a little beaten up, but he's not exactly on death's door. Although there is a very interesting scene with an escalator that I thought was pretty great. And it's all about whether or not they're going to tell the truth, or they're going to lie in court. Will they get any money from this? Will Mr. Burns just try and pay them off instead? It's pretty great, pretty gripping, and usually with The Simpsons you can kind of predict what's going to happen. But with this one, the first time I watched it, I remember not really knowing where it was going. And even watching it just now, I don't know how many times I've seen this episode, quite a few times, but there were bits that I'd forgotten because it has been quite a while. And there were some moments where I couldn't quite remember what happened next. And it did take me by surprise, so it's definitely an edge-of-your-seat episode. One of the most intense, for sure. Obviously, there's a strong message in here about doing the right thing and not lying and not swindling money out of people. But at the same time, you could look at it the other way and say there's also a message for people like Mr. Burns who have a duty of care. And well, you could argue that they should pay for the hospital bills because the Simpsons haven't got that much money. Homer is employed by him, and he did hit Bart with his car. It raises a lot of moral questions, and ultimately it makes me very thankful that I live in the UK where we don't have to pay for healthcare. Granted, our taxes do pay for our healthcare, so actually, when people say healthcare is free in the UK, it's not. But our taxes pay for it. But nevertheless, it makes me glad that we're never faced with gigantic hospital bills and never have to face this kind of problem. It's a really gripping episode that I found to be a lot of fun, really unpredictable. I think everybody in this is on top form. Bart is a really interesting character in here. He doesn't have too much character development, which is unusual when he's the titular character. But nevertheless, I found him to be an absolute delight. Lisa, I'm surprised, didn't speak up as much as she could have done, but that's not really a problem. I think Marge was the most interesting one, and her opinion and where she stood on things. Definitely the silent driving force behind the narrative and where it could or could not lead. Bart Gets Hit by a Car is an absolutely brilliant episode, and I think this is roughly midpoint of the second season. I'm pretty sure it's midpoint. I hope I'm not coming towards the end of the second season, as I'm really enjoying this season. It is fantastic, and yes, it's yet another episode focusing on Bart, but that's not a problem. It works really well. It's a really, really enjoyable episode.